Black Girl Say Something, where this black girl has something to say. And this episode is called Full Circle. So I have my iPad because I was clearing out my storage as part of my 2024 resolution, and I came across a screenshot of a post that I created back in 2017. And so back in 2017, I had turned 30, and I was on this journey to wanting to create my brand, wanting to be more focused on content creation, and wanting to get the word out there about who I was and some of the things that I faced and some of the struggles. But it wasn't the time. And so, fast forward all of these years later, I want to share this with you, something that I wrote. And it said she was ashamed of some of the things she had done, and she realized she wasn't the only one. And then there was another one that I wrote that says, do you remember when life seemed so hard and you survived? That one right there hit me right here. It hit me so hard because December 2nd, 2017, I wrote that. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, wow, I survived. Now, a lot happened between 2017 and 2024, and the story is still being written. The story is still happening as far as my divorce. But aside from that, so many other great things have happened since then. And the one thing that I can come to mind when I think about the previous post that I read is that when I remember when I first came to the idea of even letting strangers know that I'm in the middle of a divorce. I was at a pole class because I had started wanting to do back to pole fitness, which was something I was doing before I even had my children. I really liked pole fitness. And so I started pole fitness 2022, and I met a young woman, and we were talking, we were having a conversation. I ended up telling her I have 2 children. She's like, oh my God, you look so young. You don't look like you have 2 children. So when I ended up telling her how old my children are, she ended up telling me like, oh my gosh, like, what's the key to you being so happy and youthful or whatever? And I was like, oh, I'm in the middle of a divorce. And I kind of said it as a slip of the tongue because of course this lady's a stranger, like, well, I'm telling her I'm getting a divorce. And she was like, me too. And it was like, oh, I'm getting my doctorate at so-and-so school. And she's like, oh, I'm finishing up my master's at so-and-so school. And so we ended up finding out we were at the same school and our graduations were happening around the same time. And that was the first encounter of realizing, oh my gosh, people be going through, women have gone through some crazy things. And just me mentioning like I'm going through a divorce to a woman will open up a whole can of worms. And I'm sure many of you have heard about it's happened all over online, and kudos to her for sharing her story, and Good Morning America and all of these different people have picked her up. And I typically, on my platform don't like to reference other things that are happening in social media. But this one is relevant to the case that I'm trying to make. Risa Tisa and the Who the F Did I Marry series really opened up a whole bunch of different subtopics that can come from everything that happened. One that I truly can identify with is the religion aspect of it. And it came from the organization that we was a part of, the church that we was a part of at the time. One very early on, like, we were a part of 2 churches at one point. One where it was like, hey, y'all might as well get married, y'all already have a child. And when I look back on it, it's like the verbiage of you might as well. Anywho, listen to Settle versus Content, because that's the very first episode I recorded for Black Girl Say Something when I first started my podcast. But you might as well always sound so like you just do it just because, right? There was no real foundation, there was no real basis. And I always like to say we were just a couple of early adults, early people who are in our early adulthood who got married way too young, and we grew apart. That is the simplest way to put it. But aside from that, there was the domestic violence, there was the financial abuse, the social abuse, and so many other things. But then when I think about the community aspect, the community, and so for me, might as well sound like just do it just because. So I always like to put in the simplest terms when I don't want to divulge like the level of trauma that I endured with my children's father. I always say we were just very young. We got married very young and we grew apart, which essentially is the basis, because once we started to grow apart, that's when he became more aggressive and more abusive. So it's not a lie, it's definitely the truth. It's just I'm not going to divulge my trauma to someone who I'm just meeting, right? But with that being said, like I said, there was two things that I took from her story, which was the religious aspect and the not having a community. And the assumption would be that if you have a community, you should be able to let them know, feel comfortable enough to let them know. And I always look back and say, you know what? I didn't really talk to anybody. One, because I was embarrassed, because I got pregnant by somebody that I barely knew, and allow them to coerce me into the decision of keeping it. It is what it is. That's one of the things. Two, once we got married, the religious aspect was like this idea of do not speak ill of your husband. So it was very much, I was very much put in a place of isolation. So I couldn't really, or I didn't feel comfortable letting people know what was going on. And it was so freeing all those years later to start letting people know, hey, this is what's going on, this is what's going on. And I'll never forget that one friend that I told, this what happened, this is crazy. And she was like, you need to call the police. You need to have some type of documentation in case things go to left. And by to left, like, you know, it's all in the news. You have estranged husbands and kids, and it's a whole thing. But with that being said, how does all of that tie into the full circle? The full circle for me is being able to recognize that you could have, your blessing could be right here, and there could be somebody just standing right in the way, blocking that blessing, right? And it was like once he was out of the way, I had wanted to be a professor since 2018 when I got my master's, because my master's is in higher education. My master's is in health science with a concentration in higher education. So I knew from the jump when I applied to get my master's, I want to be a professor. I didn't become a professor until 2022. And he had filed for divorce December 2021. You see where I'm going? It happened just like that. I always wanted to teach children, because I became a substitute teacher through COVID, because I got a certificate. And again, that was in 2020 when I got the certificate. He filed for divorce 2021, 2022. I was working with an after school program, teaching kids things like robotics, art, 3D printing, all these different type of skills with a private school. I wanted, when I graduated my master's in 2018, I wanted a Tesla. I got it in 2022. My daughter, who had been an avid gymnast, let me tell you something, I would big her up on social media, but my baby was bombing she was not doing her best when it came to competing against her peers. She had the worst competition season of 2020 ended early. The worst competition season of 2021. He filed for divorce in 2021 of December. 2022, she was in the top 2 every time, all around. Every time, all around. She has so many trophies on her dresser from 2022. And then she decided to take off 2023, and we got back in for 2024. And of course, she had a little bit of a fall, so she's taking a break and has to do some physical therapy. But she's doing well. But with that being said, the blessing could be so close, and it came full circle for me in therapy when I said it just felt good to put my key in the door and come in the house. The energy was gone. The energy had shifted. Of course, it took a work to get it to a place where it felt safe. Because I could say I've had some sleepless nights in the beginning, Because it's like, what if he decide to come back? What if he decide, yeah, there's a restraining order in place, but people, you don't know their mental capacity. You don't know where they're at, especially when you break free of their narrative of you. The full circle moment is that it gets better. It gets better. I'm better. I'm doing better. I'm being better. I feel better. That's the full circle moment. The fact that I know that this, what I have accomplished, this place where I'm at, and it's not about the tangible, but it's about the feeling, the mental capacity, the emotional stability, the promises that I've made to myself, I can keep them. Because I don't have anybody trying to knock me off my track or knock me off my path. That nothing happens before it's time, but sometimes things can happen before it's time. You just got to reevaluate who's in the circle. That's the full circle moment. Some people are in the circle with you because they want to block you from the blessings, and that's been my experience. And then there's some people who's in the circle who genuinely, like, no matter what, they gonna let people know, like, that's not the one to be talking about. They don't play about you. And I'm so grateful for the people that don't play about me. Anywho, if something was said that resonated with you, I encourage you to share this episode with at least one person. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and like I said, share it with somebody. You can tune into Black Girl Say Something every Friday at 1 p.m. wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on a lot of platforms, y'all. So leave a comment too. Let me know what you think of the episode. Ask me some questions. Leave me some topics that you want to know. Trust me, this Black girl has something to say. Thank you for listening.